The first time my sons called him Dad, it was not in a family photo, not at a birthday table, and not in the warm home he should have given us. It was in the middle of a schoolyard, with half the town watching and my heart forgetting how to beat. Caleb Monroe had spent 7 years teaching himself not to look back. 7 years of waking before sunrise above Bellwether Cafe and books, packing lunches with star-shaped sandwiches, tying small sneakers by the door, and pretending the empty place at the breakfast table did not have a name. But on that crisp October afternoon at Ashford Elementary, the past walked into the fall festival wearing a charcoal coat, polished shoes, and the same winter cold scent Caleb had once trusted with his whole life. Ethan Whitmore stood near the sponsor banner for the Whitmore Foundation, smiling politely at parents who knew his last name from business magazines and hospital winks, not from bedtime stories whispered to fatherless children. He looked older than Caleb remembered, sharper at the edges, but still impossibly composed, still the kind of alpha people made room for without being asked. Caleb had planned to avoid him. He had planned to keep Noah and Oliver near the pumpkin booth, buy them caramel apples, clap during their class performance, and leave before Ethan could connect 2 7-year-old boys with pale hair, silver blue eyes, and a scent that carried pieces of him like an old song. Plans, Caleb had learned, were fragile things. Noah stood on the small outdoor stage in a paper crown, trying to remember his line about autumn leaves, while Oliver bounced beside him, waving too hard whenever he spotted Caleb in the crowd. Then 2 older kids near the hay bales laughed loudly enough for Caleb to hear. One of them said something about the Monroe twins not having a dad to sit in the parent row. Oliver's smile folded in on itself. Noah heard it too. Caleb saw the change immediately, the way his quiet son straightened, the way he stepped half an inch in front of his brother like a shield made of 7-year-old courage. "Ignore them," Noah whispered, but his little hands were shaking. The teacher called for the next line. The music crackled through the speakers, and Noah stepped backward without looking. His heel caught on a loose orange extension cord taped near the stage edge. It was not a dangerous fall, not the kind that should have changed lives, but time broke open anyway. Caleb moved, but Ethan was closer. In one breath, the alpha crossed the grass and caught Noah under the arms before he tumbled off the low platform. The crowd gasped, the music stopped, and Oliver ran down the steps with tears already bright in his eyes. He threw himself against Ethan's side, small fingers clutching the sleeve of that expensive coat, and the word came out raw, scared, and certain. "Dad, don't let him fall!" No one spoke. Not the teachers. Not the parents. Not Ethan Whitmore, who knelt in the grass with one son in his arms and the other pressed against him as if his body had recognized a home his heart had never been allowed to enter. Caleb felt every eye turned toward him, felt the old wound reopen beneath his ribs, felt 7 years collapse into one impossible second. Ethan looked up at Caleb, and for the first time since the day he destroyed him, there was no command in his expression, no pride, no alpha certainty. Only shock, regret, and a silent question he had no right to ask. Caleb's hands curled around the strap of his canvas bag. He wanted to run to his sons, wanted to pull them away, wanted to tell Ethan he was too late by 7 birthdays, 7 Christmas mornings, 7 fevers, 7 first days of school. But Noah was looking at Ethan too, confused and breathless, as if some hidden truth had slipped into the sunlight before any adult could stop it. Oliver still had not let go. "Daddy?" Noah whispered, turning toward Caleb now, and that single word hurt worse than the silence of the crowd. Caleb crossed the grass slowly. Each step felt like walking back through rain, glass towers, and a voice that once said he was lying. Ethan did not stand. He did not claim them. He did not say my sons. He only held still, waiting for Caleb to decide what this moment was allowed to become. Caleb knelt beside Noah first, brushing a leaf from his sweater, checking his elbows, his cheeks, his frightened eyes. "You're okay," he said, though he was not sure which one of them he meant. Oliver looked between Caleb and Ethan, his small face full of questions too big for a schoolyard. Ethan's voice came low and unsteady. "Caleb." Hearing his name in that voice almost broke him. Caleb looked at the man who had once been his alpha, the man who had seen a pregnancy test in his trembling hand and chosen his family's approval over the Omega carrying his child. His answer was quiet, but it cut through the entire crowd. You lost the right to say that name 7 years ago. Ethan's face went pale. And somewhere behind Caleb, a parent whispered, 7 years? Caleb gathered Noah close with one arm and reached for Oliver with the other. But Oliver hesitated, still holding Ethan's sleeve, and in that hesitation lived the whole tragedy of their lives. A child could miss a father he had never met. A father could be recognized before he was forgiven. And an Omega could survive heartbreak so completely that the world mistook his silence for healing. Caleb lifted his chin, refusing to let his tears fall in front of the town that would gossip by dinner. Come on, boys, he said softly. We're going home. Noah obeyed at once. Oliver took one small step, then looked back at Ethan with trembling lips. Ethan let him go. That was what hurt Caleb most. For once, Ethan did the right thing, and it was 7 years too late. As Caleb led his sons away from the festival, the Whitmore banner snapped in the October wind behind them, bright and spotless, pretending legacy was something clean. But Caleb knew the truth. Before Ethan Whitmore ever knelt in that schoolyard, before 2 little boys called him Dad, before the town learned that the perfect alpha had a hidden family, there had been another day, another crowd, another kind of judgment. 7 years earlier, Caleb had stood in Ethan's glass office with a folded medical report in his hand, his heart full of fear and hope, and told the man he loved that he was pregnant. And Ethan had looked at him like the child inside him was a scandal, not a miracle. 7 years earlier, Caleb Monroe believed love could survive a room full of people who wanted it gone. He arrived at Whitmore Tower just after 9 in the morning, wearing his best navy sweater under a raincoat that still smelled faintly of the subway and October rain. The building rose over Midtown Manhattan like a blade of glass, all silver elevators, marble floors, and men in tailored suits who looked through him as if an Omega with a second-hand messenger bag did not belong anywhere near the executive level. Caleb kept one hand inside his coat pocket, fingers pressed around the folded medical report from St. Agnes Clinic. The paper had grown soft at the creases because he had opened it so many times on the train, reading the same words until fear and wonder became impossible to separate. Positive pregnancy confirmation. Estimated 6 weeks. He had not slept the night before. He had imagined Ethan's face 100 different ways. Shock, maybe. Fear, certainly. But beneath it all, Caleb had believed there would be joy, because Ethan had once held him on the roof of a brownstone in Brooklyn and promised that nothing with the Whitmore name would ever be allowed to hurt him. The receptionist on the top floor recognized Caleb, but her smile disappeared the moment she saw the security guard waiting beside the frosted glass doors. Mr. Whitmore is in a meeting, she said too quickly. He told me to come, Caleb replied, showing the text Ethan had sent before sunrise. We need to talk today. Come to my office at 9. The receptionist lowered her eyes, pressed a button, and let him through. Inside the conference room, Ethan stood at the head of a long black table while a dozen executives studied tablets and folders. Beside him sat Margaret Whitmore, his mother, elegant in a cream suit, her pale hair pinned so tightly it made her face look carved from ice. Her perfume reached Caleb before her voice did, sharp and expensive, covering every familiar trace of Ethan's winter cedar scent. Ethan turned when Caleb entered. For 1 second, the alpha Caleb loved was still there, startled and worried, as if his body had moved toward Caleb before his pride remembered the room. Then Margaret placed a folder on the table. Good, she said. Now we can settle this properly. Caleb stopped. Settle what? Ethan did not answer. Margaret opened the folder and slid out printed photographs, bank statements, and a document Caleb had never seen in his life. Your arrangement, she said. The money you requested. The threats you made. The unfortunate claim that you are carrying my son's child. Caleb felt the floor tilt beneath him. That is not true. His voice sounded too small in the glass room. He looked at Ethan, not at her. Ethan, I did not ask for money. I came because I am pregnant. He pulled the medical report from his pocket with shaking hands and stepped toward him. I went to the clinic yesterday. I was scared, but I thought you should hear it from me. Ethan stared at the paper, but he did not take it. Behind him, the city blurred into gray rain. Margaret sighed as if Caleb were an inconvenience on her schedule. A clinic report proves pregnancy, not paternity. And not sincerity. Caleb's cheeks burned. I have never lied to him. You have no family name, no financial stability, and no reason to be near my son except what his future can give you, Margaret said. Do not mistake affection for entitlement. Ethan's jaw tightened. Caleb waited for him to speak, to cut through the room with the command everyone expected from an alpha. He waited for Ethan to say enough. He waited for the promise from the rooftop. Instead, Ethan looked down at the folder his mother had prepared. Caleb, he said, and the softness in his voice made the next words worse. Why did you not tell me before going to anyone else? Caleb blinked. I did not go to anyone else. There are messages here. Ethan pushed one page forward. Requests for payment. A threat to leak this to the press. Caleb stared at the printed words, his own name attached to sentences he had never written. Those are fake. Margaret folded her hands. Convenient. Caleb's fingers curled around the clinic report until the edge bent. Look at me, he whispered to Ethan. Not at her. Not at those papers. Look at me and ask yourself if I would do that to you. For a moment, Ethan did look at him. Caleb saw pain there, and doubt, and something even more frightening. Calculation. The Whitmore merger was happening that week. His engagement announcement to a daughter of another old family had already been whispered about in business columns. Caleb understood all of it in one terrible breath. Loving him had become inconvenient. Believing him would cost too much. Ethan stepped back from the table, putting distance between them as if Caleb's hope were something dangerous. I do not know what you want from me, he said, each word controlled and public. But it will not be my name. The room went silent. Caleb did not cry at first. The shock was too clean, too bright. He lowered the medical report slowly, as if any sudden movement might break the child inside him. Your name? He repeated. I came here because there is a baby. Ethan's eyes flickered, but he did not move. Margaret slid a check across the table. Take this and leave New York quietly. Caleb looked at the check, then at Ethan. Is that what you want? Ethan said nothing. That was the answer that followed Caleb out of the conference room, past the receptionist who would not meet his eyes, down 43 floors in an elevator that smelled like metal and roses, and into rain so cold it stole his breath. He stood beneath the awning of Whitmore Tower with one hand over his stomach and the ruined medical report pressed to his chest. For the first time, Caleb understood that a person could be abandoned in the middle of a crowded city and still feel like the last living soul on earth. He did not know yet that Margaret would make sure every message he sent Ethan vanished. He did not know that the child he was protecting was really 2 tiny heartbeats waiting to be found. All he knew was that the alpha who had promised to protect him had chosen the room over him, the name over the baby, and silence over love. Caleb did not leave New York like someone beginning a new life. He left like someone trying to keep one small life from being swallowed by the one he had just lost. By noon, his phone had 15 missed calls from numbers he did not recognize and one message from an attorney representing the Whitmore family, written in language so polite it felt colder than any insult. By sunset, his apartment in Queens no longer felt safe. He packed 2 sweaters, 3 pairs of jeans, the clinic report, and the little cash he had hidden in a coffee tin above the refrigerator. Everything else stayed behind: the cracked blue mug Ethan once used, the silver scarf from their first winter, the framed photograph Caleb turned face down before locking the door. He bought a one-way bus ticket at Port Authority with shaking hands, choosing the farthest town he could afford without thinking too hard about where it was. Ashford, Vermont, sounded small enough to disappear in. The bus rode north through rain-dark highways and quiet towns, and Caleb sat by the window with his palm resting over his stomach, whispering promises he did not know how to keep. He promised the baby food, warmth, a name untouched by Whitmore money. He promised never to let anyone look at them like they were a problem to be solved. Somewhere after midnight, his phone lit up with Ethan's name. Caleb stared at it until the call ended. Then a text appeared. We need to handle this privately. He read it once, twice, 10 times, searching for love between the words and finding only control. Before dawn, the signal faded in the mountains, and Caleb let it. Ashford greeted him with wet sidewalks, a gas station, a church bell, and a main street lined with maple trees already turning gold. He made it 3 blocks from the bus stop before the dizziness hit. The world softened around the edges, the sidewalk swayed under his shoes, and the last thing he remembered was the smell of cinnamon rolls coming from a cafe with a faded green awning. When Caleb opened his eyes, he was lying on a worn leather couch beneath a quilt, with an older woman pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "Easy now," she said. "You scared my morning customers half to death." Her name was Ruth Bennett, owner of Bellwether Cafe and Books, 62 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and somehow more solid than the entire Whitmore Tower. She had silver hair, flower on her sleeve, and the kind of eyes that did not ask questions until a person was ready to answer. Caleb tried to sit up too quickly and almost cried from the wave of nausea. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I can pay for the trouble. I just need to go." Ruth looked at his pale face, his rain-soaked bag, and the way his hand moved protectively to his stomach. "You are not going anywhere except the clinic 2 streets over." Caleb wanted to refuse, but his body had already made the decision for him. An hour later, he sat on an examination table at Ashford Family Care, wearing a paper gown and gripping Ruth's hand even though he had known her for less than a morning. The doctor was kind, careful, and middle-aged, with a soft voice that made the room feel less frightening. Caleb expected confirmation of what he already knew. One baby. One impossible future. One reason to keep breathing. But then the doctor moved the ultrasound wand, paused, and smiled in surprise. "Mr. Monroe," she said gently, "there is something I want you to hear." A quick rhythm filled the small room, bright and fast like tiny wings. Caleb's eyes blurred instantly. Then the doctor shifted the wand again, and another rhythm joined the first. Not an echo. Not a mistake. A second heartbeat. Caleb stopped breathing. Ruth's hand tightened around his. The doctor pointed to the screen, where 2 small shapes flickered inside the gray and silver haze. "You are carrying twins." For a moment, Caleb felt the floor fall away beneath him again, but this time there was no glass office, no cold table, no check sliding toward him like a final insult. There was only sound. 2 heartbeats. 2 lives. 2 reasons the word alone no longer meant what it had meant on the bus. Caleb covered his mouth, and the tears came so suddenly he could not hide them. He cried because he was terrified. He cried because Ethan should have been there. He cried because the room was too small to hold the grief of being rejected and the miracle of being chosen by 2 tiny souls at the same time. Ruth leaned closer, her voice rough but steady. "Then we protect 3 lives now," she said. "And yours counts too." Those words became the first piece of home Caleb had been given since losing everything. Ruth let him stay in the apartment above the cafe for 1 night, then 1 week, then without ever announcing it forever. Caleb washed dishes when the smell of coffee did not make him sick, shelved paperbacks between naps, and learned which customers liked oat milk, which liked gossip, and which left extra dollars in the tip jar because Ruth had quietly told them he was family. Letters from attorneys arrived twice, then stopped. Messages from Ethan never reached him again after Caleb changed his number, though he would not learn until years later that some had been intercepted long before. By winter, snow covered Ashford in white silence, and Caleb stood at the upstairs window with both hands on his growing stomach, watching Main Street lights glow through the dark. He did not feel healed. He did not feel brave. But beneath his palms, 2 small movements answered him, one on the left and one on the right, as if the twins were already reminding him that his life had not ended in that tower. It had divided, multiplied, and begun again. By the time Noah and Oliver were 7, Bellwether Cafe and Books no longer felt like the place Caleb had run to. It felt like the place he had built with his own tired hands, one early morning at a time. The cafe sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, with a faded green awning, a blue front door, and windows wide enough to catch the first gold light over Ashford every morning. Downstairs smelled of cinnamon, dark roast coffee, old paperbacks, and maple syrup from the bakery next door. Upstairs, where Caleb lived with his sons, the hallway was narrow, the floorboards complained in winter, and the kitchen table had 3 mismatched chairs because Caleb had never been able to bring himself to buy a fourth. Noah noticed things like that. Oliver asked about them. "What if someone comes over for pancakes?" Oliver said one Sunday morning, his bare feet swinging under the table while Caleb poured batter into a skillet. "Then they can sit on the stool," Caleb said. "What if it is someone tall?" Noah looked up from his library book. "Tall people can use stools." Oliver wrinkled his nose. "What if it is our dad?" The spatula paused in Caleb's hand for less than a second, but Noah saw it. Noah always saw everything. Caleb turned the pancake carefully, letting the soft hiss of butter fill the silence before he answered. He was far away before he knew how to come home. It was not a lie, not exactly, but it was shaped like one, and Caleb hated how easily it fit in his mouth after 7 years. Oliver accepted it with the generous faith of a child who wanted the world to be kind. Noah did not. Noah had Ethan's eyes and Caleb's caution, a dangerous combination in a boy who kept his feelings folded away like notes in a pocket. He was the one who made sure Oliver had his gloves before school, the one who walked on the street side of the sidewalk, the one who stared down anyone who called them the Monroe boys with no father. Oliver was sunlight where Noah was a locked door. He talked to customers, fed crumbs to the sparrows outside, and believed family could be recognized by things adults ignored, like the smell of a sweater or the way someone said your name. Caleb loved them so fiercely that sometimes it frightened him. They were proof that his worst day had not been the end of his life. They were also living echoes of the man he had tried to forget. Their pale hair caught the light the same way Ethan's had under Manhattan office windows. Their silver blue eyes changed color before a storm. When Noah was angry, the air around him cooled with a faint winter note that did not belong to Caleb at all. Ruth called it inheritance. Caleb called it the part of the past he could not pack away. By then, Ruth had retired from running the cafe every day, though she still lived in the small house behind it, and came in each afternoon to criticize Caleb's bookkeeping, spoil the twins, and remind him to eat something besides leftover muffins. "You made a good life here," she told him one Thursday while he stacked mugs behind the counter. Caleb looked toward the window, where Noah and Oliver were crossing the street with their teacher and the rest of their second-grade class, all paper leaves and construction paper crowns for the upcoming fall festival. "I made a quiet one," he said. Ruth gave him a look over her glasses. "Quiet is not the same as safe, honey." Caleb almost asked what she meant. But the bell above the door rang and the twins burst in, carrying school folders and the smell of cold air. Oliver climbed onto a stool and announced that the Whitmore Foundation was sponsoring the Fall Literacy Fair. Caleb dropped a mug. It did not break, but the sound cracked through the cafe like a warning. Noah watched him from the doorway. "Our teacher said a businessman is coming from New York," Oliver continued. "Ethan something. He is important." Caleb's hand tightened around the counter. For a moment, the cafe disappeared. He was back in that glass office with rain sliding down the windows and Margaret Whitmore's cream suit glowing under white lights. Ethan something. As if the name had not lived under Caleb's ribs for 7 years like a splinter. Ruth moved first, taking the mug from his hand. "Breathe," she murmured. Caleb did, but it hurt. That night, after the twins were asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with the school flyer spread before him. Whitmore Foundation Fall Literacy Fair. Special guest, Ethan Whitmore. The letters looked harmless in cheerful orange ink, surrounded by clip art pumpkins and cartoon books. Caleb read them until his eyes burned. He told himself Ashford was small but not that small. He told himself Ethan would give a speech, shake hands, and leave. He told himself 7 years had changed him enough that one alpha cent could not undo the life he had built. The next morning, rain fell over Main Street in a soft gray curtain. Caleb opened the cafe early, distracted enough to overfill the first espresso shot. At 8:17, the bell above the door rang. "Black coffee, please," a man said, his voice low, familiar, and impossible. Caleb froze with his back to the counter. The scent reached him before he turned around, winter air and cedarwood, clean and cold as the day his heart had broken. His Omega instincts recognized it instantly, treacherously, before his mind could build a wall. Slowly, Caleb faced the front of the cafe. Ethan Whitmore stood just inside the blue door, rain shining on the shoulders of his charcoal coat, one hand still on the handle, as if he had walked into a memory without knowing it. For a second, either of them spoke. Ethan's eyes moved over Caleb's face, searching through 7 years of distance and grief. Recognition struck him quietly, then all at once. Caleb? Caleb felt the old name land between them, soft and unbearable. Before he could answer, footsteps thundered on the stairs. Oliver came down first, laughing, with Noah close behind him. They stopped when they saw the stranger by the door. Ethan turned toward them, and every trace of color left his face. Oliver tilted his head, sniffed the air with innocent curiosity, and said, "Mister, why do you smell like winter?" Noah did not ask anything. He simply stepped in front of his brother and looked at Ethan like a locked door learning the shape of a key. Ethan Whitmore had spent 7 years learning how to keep his face unreadable, but nothing in any boardroom, courtroom, or private family dinner had prepared him for 2 small boys standing at the foot of a cafe staircase with his eyes on their faces. The question Oliver asked was innocent, almost musical, but it landed in the room with the weight of a confession. "Mister, why do you smell like winter?" Caleb's breath caught. Ruth, who had been setting a tray of blueberry muffins behind the counter, went completely still. Outside, rain tapped softly against the front windows, turning Main Street into a watercolor blur, but inside Bellwether Cafe every sound seemed to disappear except the quiet ticking of the wall clock and the uneven breath Ethan failed to hide. His gaze moved from Oliver to Noah, then back again, as if his mind refused to accept what his instincts had already understood. Pale hair. Silver blue eyes. The faint, unmistakable trace of Whitmore alpha blood woven through the warm scent of maple, laundry soap, and childhood. Oliver stepped closer before Caleb could stop him, curiosity stronger than caution. "You smell like the air before snow," he said. "Daddy says snow makes everything quiet." Noah grabbed Oliver's sleeve and pulled him back. "Do not talk to strangers." Ethan looked at Noah then, really looked, and Caleb saw the moment recognition turned into something sharper. Noah's stare was not just guarded. It was familiar. It held Ethan's old composure in miniature, but without the polished cruelty of wealth around it. This child did not command rooms. He protected one person in them. "Caleb," Ethan said again, softer this time, and the sound made Caleb's hand close around the edge of the counter. "No," Caleb replied. "You came for coffee. Take it and leave." Ethan blinked as if the words had reached him from far away. "They are yours?" The room changed. Not louder, not colder, but thinner, as if one more breath could tear it open. Ruth stepped forward, her expression calm enough to be kind and hard enough to be a warning. "Mr. Whitmore, this is a family business. You will watch your words around children." Ethan seemed to remember himself. He straightened, but the power that usually followed him did not fill the cafe. It stayed outside in the rain, useless. "I am sorry," he said, though it was unclear who he was apologizing to. Caleb poured black coffee into a paper cup because his hands needed something to do. The lid snapped on too loudly. $2.75. Ethan did not reach for his wallet. His eyes had returned to the boys. Oliver, sensing the strange sadness in the adult faces, moved behind Noah and whispered, "Did I do something bad?" The tiny question nearly undid Caleb. He came around the counter at once, crouched in front of both boys, and smoothed Oliver's pale hair away from his forehead. "No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong." Noah kept looking over Caleb's shoulder. "Who is he?" Caleb had prepared for this question in 100 imaginary ways. In every version, they were older. In every version, they were at home. In every version, his voice did not shake. Ethan took one half-step forward. Caleb stood immediately, placing himself between Ethan and the twins. The movement was small, but Ethan stopped as if it were a locked gate. "You do not get to ask anything in front of them," Caleb said. Ethan's face tightened with pain. "I thought you left." Caleb let out a quiet laugh with no warmth in it. "That is what they told you. There were documents. There were lies." Ethan looked as though the rain outside had finally reached him. "I tried to find." You. Not hard enough. The words were not loud, but Noah heard them. Caleb knew because his son's expression changed from confusion to calculation. Noah was putting pieces together, and he was too young for pieces that sharp. Ruth crossed the room and gently guided the twins toward the bakery case. Who wants a muffin for the walk to school? Oliver glanced at Caleb for permission. Caleb nodded, grateful for the rescue, but Noah did not move right away. He looked at Ethan one more time and asked, "Did you make my daddy sad?" Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. The silence answered before he could. Noah turned away first, pulling Oliver with him. That hurt Caleb in a way he did not expect, because his son had defended him without even knowing the story. Ethan finally took out his wallet and placed a $10 bill on the counter, but he did not take the change, and he did not touch the coffee. "I need to know the truth," he said. Caleb looked at the paper cup cooling between them. 7 years ago, he would have begged Ethan to believe him. 7 years ago, he would have placed his heart in Ethan's hands and waited to be chosen. That Caleb had cried himself to sleep on a bus heading north. This Caleb had packed lunches to make, a cafe to open, and 2 children who mattered more than any apology that arrived years late. The truth is upstairs in 2 twin beds with dinosaur sheets and glow-in-the-dark stars, Caleb said. The truth lost its first tooth in this cafe. The truth learned to ride bikes in the church parking lot. The truth asked me why other kids had fathers at school breakfast, and they did not. Ethan went pale. "How old are they?" Caleb's answer was barely above a whisper. 7. Ethan closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, the alpha Caleb remembered was gone. There was only a man staring at the exact shape of what he had lost. Before he could speak, the school bell rang from 2 blocks away, faint through the rain. Oliver came back with a muffin in each hand, trying to smile. Noah stood beside him, still watchful. Caleb took their backpacks from the hook by the door. "Come on, boys." As they passed Ethan, Oliver looked up and said quietly, "Bye, winter, mister." Ethan pressed one hand against the doorframe, as if that small goodbye had taken the strength from his knees. Caleb did not look back until the twins were under the awning outside. Through the cafe window, he saw Ethan standing alone beside the untouched coffee, surrounded by the warm life Caleb had built after him, and finally understanding that he was not looking at a mistake from the past. He was looking at the family he had refused before it ever had names. Caleb made it through the walk to school by answering only the questions that had simple shapes. Yes, Oliver could eat half his muffin before class. No, Noah could not skip the fall festival rehearsal just because the sponsor smelled strange. Yes, Caleb would be there at 3:15 sharp, standing by the gate like always. But the question that followed them all the way from Maple Street to Ashford Elementary had no simple shape at all. Noah waited until Oliver ran ahead to show his teacher the blueberry stain on his sleeve, then looked up at Caleb with those silver-blue eyes that made lying feel like stepping on glass. "Daddy," he said quietly, "was that man the reason you looked scared?" Caleb stopped beside the chain-link fence, one hand still holding Noah's backpack strap. Around them, parents unloaded lunch boxes, buses sighed at the curb, and children shouted about pumpkins and library posters, but for Caleb, the morning narrowed to his son's careful face. He had wanted more time. Every parent wanted more time before the world asked their children for answers too heavy to carry. "I was surprised," Caleb said. Noah did not blink. "That is not what I asked?" Caleb almost smiled, because stubborn honesty was the one thing Noah had inherited from him without question. He crouched on the sidewalk so they were eye level. "He is someone I knew a long time ago." Noah's fingers tightened around the straps of his backpack. "Did he hurt your feelings?" There were so many soft answers Caleb could have chosen, but Noah would remember all of them later, and Caleb refused to build his sons' lives on pretty lies. "Yes," he said. "A long time ago, he hurt me very much." Noah looked toward the school doors, where Oliver was waving at them with both arms. "Then I do not like him." Caleb touched Noah's cheek gently. "You do not have to decide anything today." Noah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Does Oliver have to know?" The question nearly broke him, because Noah was 7 years old, and already trying to protect his brother from truth like it was weather. Caleb kissed his forehead. Not at school. Not like this. That promise lasted until dinner. All afternoon, the cafe felt wrong, as if Ethan's untouched coffee had left a shadow on the counter. Ruth tried to talk about inventory, customers tried to talk about pumpkin spice cupcakes, and Caleb tried to act like his hands did not shake every time the bell above the door rang. Ethan did not come back. That should have helped. It did not. At 5:30, the twins sat at the upstairs kitchen table eating grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup from mismatched bowls. Oliver dipped his crust in circles and said, "The winter mister looked sad." Caleb set down the pitcher of lemonade. Noah stared at his soup. "His name is Ethan." Oliver turned to him. "How do you know?" Noah looked at Caleb. "Because Daddy knew him." The room went so quiet that Caleb could hear the old refrigerator hum. Oliver's spoon slipped into his bowl. "Daddy?" Caleb sat down across from them, folding his hands to keep them still. The kitchen was small and warm, with rain tapping against the window and the smell of toasted bread in the air. It was the safest place Caleb knew, and still, the truth felt dangerous there. "There is something I need to tell you both," he said. Oliver's eyes grew round. Noah did not move at all. Caleb took a breath. "Before you were born, I knew Ethan Whitmore. He was important to me," Oliver whispered. "Like family?" Caleb's throat tightened. "I thought he would be." Noah understood first. Caleb saw it happen, saw the light change behind his son's eyes. "Is he our father?" Oliver turned so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Noah." Caleb closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them because his sons deserved to see his face when he answered. "Yes. Ethan is your biological father." Oliver's lips trembled. "Did he know about us?" Caleb reached across the table, but Oliver pulled his hands into his lap, not angry, only overwhelmed. "He knew I was pregnant," Caleb said carefully. "He did not know there were 2 babies yet." Noah's voice came out flat. "But he left anyway." Caleb could not soften that without betraying himself. "Yes." Oliver's eyes filled with tears. "Did he not want me?" "Sweetheart, listen to me." Caleb moved around the table and knelt beside him. "You and Noah were wanted by me from the moment I heard your heartbeats. Nothing Ethan did can change that. Nothing anyone says can change that." Oliver leaned into him, crying quietly against his shoulder. Across the table, Noah did not cry. That worried Caleb more. Noah only looked toward the dark window, his small face hard with a pain too old for him. The next morning, Ethan returned before opening, standing outside the blue door in the cold with 2 hot chocolates in a cardboard tray and a black coffee he had clearly bought somewhere else because he did not dare ask Caleb for anything. He did not come in. He waited until Caleb unlocked the door, then held the tray out like an apology that knew it was not enough. "For them," he said. Caleb did not take it. Noah appeared on the stairs in his socks, already dressed for school, his hair still messy from sleep. He looked at Ethan through the open doorway and asked the question no adult in 7 years had been brave enough to say plainly. "Did you know Daddy was pregnant when you made him cry?" Ethan went still. The street behind him was pale with morning fog. Caleb could have stopped it, could have sent Noah upstairs, could have protected Ethan from a child's truth. He did not. Ethan lowered the tray slowly. "Yes," he said, his voice rough. "I knew he was pregnant." Noah's eyes did not soften. "But you did not know there were 2 of us." "No," Ethan whispered. "I did not. That does not make it better." Ethan looked at Caleb then, and the regret in his face was real, but real regret did not erase 7 years of empty chairs. "No," Ethan said. "It does not." Noah stepped closer to Caleb's side. "Then hot chocolate is not enough." Caleb felt the words settle in the doorway like a verdict. Ethan nodded once, accepting it. And for the first time, Caleb saw the beginning of the only apology that might ever matter, not the kind spoken by an alpha who wanted forgiveness, but the kind lived by a father who had finally learned he was not owed a place inside the door. The fall literacy fair arrived beneath a bright October sky so blue it looked almost painted, the kind of small-town Saturday Ashford liked to remember in photographs and school newsletters. Orange paper leaves hung from the chain-link fence, hay bales framed the outdoor stage, and folding tables lined the playground with donated books, cider donuts, face paint, and paper cups of warm apple cider. Caleb stood near the back of the parent crowd with his hands wrapped around a cardboard cup he had not tasted. He had dressed Noah and Oliver in matching navy sweaters that morning because Oliver had begged for it, but now he regretted how easy it made them to spot. Two pale-haired boys under the sun, one solemn, one smiling too hard, both carrying pieces of a man who stood 30 feet away beneath the Whitmore Foundation banner. Ethan had kept his distance all morning. That was the only reason Caleb had not taken the twins home the moment he saw him. The Alpha greeted the principal, shook hands with teachers, and posed for a few polite photographs, but every few minutes his gaze found Caleb and stopped there, not demanding, not approaching, only waiting. It unsettled Caleb more than arrogance would have. Arrogance he knew how to reject. Patience felt dangerous because it looked too much like change. Noah noticed Ethan too, though he pretended not to. He stayed close to Oliver, adjusting his brother's paper leaf crown before their class performance, and reminding him to speak slowly during his line. Oliver kept sneaking looks toward Ethan with confusion in his eyes, as if his heart had found a missing note, and did not know where to place it. "Daddy," Oliver whispered before the performance, tugging Caleb's sleeve. "Do I have to not look at him?" Caleb crouched and fixed the collar of his sweater. "You do not have to do anything except be yourself." Noah folded his arms. "I am not looking." Caleb brushed a thumb over Noah's knuckles. "That is your choice too." The second grade class climbed onto the low wooden stage, each child holding a construction paper book. Their teacher, Miss Alvarez, adjusted the microphone while parents lifted phones to record. Caleb tried to focus on the boys' faces, on Oliver bouncing on his toes, on Noah standing beside him like a tiny guard, but the air carried that winter cedar scent every time the wind shifted, and his body remembered before his heart gave permission. The performance began with a song about reading under autumn trees. Oliver sang too loudly and forgot half the gestures. Noah remembered every word but kept glancing at his brother to make sure he was all right. For a few minutes, Caleb almost believed they would get through the day. Then laughter rose near the hay bales. Two older boys from the 5th grade stood close enough to be heard, not loud enough for the teachers to notice. "Those are the kids with no dad," one whispered, with the careless cruelty children sometimes borrowed from adults. "Maybe their mom forgot to invite him." Oliver's mouth stopped moving. Noah heard it too. His shoulders stiffened, and the paper book in his hands bent slightly. Caleb took one step forward, ready to call them off the stage if he had to, but Noah moved first. He shifted in front of Oliver, small chin lifted, eyes bright with the effort not to cry. "Keep singing," he whispered to his brother. Miss Alvarez called the next line. Noah stepped back to make room for Oliver, but his heel caught the loose orange extension cord taped along the edge of the stage. It was only a few inches high, only a small stumble, but fear does not measure danger in inches. Caleb's cup slipped from his hand. "Noah!" Ethan moved before anyone else did. In one clean motion, he crossed the grass and reached the stage just as Noah lost his balance. He caught the boy gently under the arms and lowered him safely to the ground. No crash, no injury, only a gasp from the crowd and the sudden silence of a town watching something it did not understand. Noah stared up at Ethan, breathless and stunned. Ethan's hands released him the instant he was steady, as if he knew even rescue did not give him the right to hold on. But Oliver had already run down the steps. His paper crown tilted over one eye, tears on his cheeks, and panic made him forget every careful conversation, every adult boundary, every unanswered question at the kitchen table. He threw his arms around Ethan's side and cried, "Dad, do not let Noah fall again!" The world stopped. Miss Alvarez covered her mouth. The principal froze beside the microphone. Parents lowered their phones only halfway, caught between curiosity and shame. Caleb stood in the grass, unable to move, the spilled apple cider soaking into the dirt at his feet. Ethan knelt there with Noah in front of him and Oliver clinging to his coat, his face stripped bare of every polished Whitmore mask. He looked at Caleb, not at the crowd, and did not say my sons. He did not claim them. He did not correct Oliver. He only waited, eyes full of a question he had no right to force into words. Caleb walked toward them slowly, each step pulling him between past and present. Noah reached for him first. Caleb took his hand and checked his face, his elbows, his little trembling fingers. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Noah shook his head, but his eyes were on Oliver, still holding Ethan. "I am okay," Noah said. Oliver got scared. Oliver looked up then, realizing what he had said. His lips parted, and fresh tears gathered. "I am sorry," he whispered. "It just came out." Ethan's voice broke softly. "You do not have to be sorry." Caleb looked at him, and the warning in his eyes made Ethan go silent again. That silence mattered. 7 years ago, Ethan had spoken over Caleb's truth. Today, in front of everyone, he let Caleb decide the shape of the moment. Caleb placed a steadying hand on Oliver's back. "Come here, sweetheart." Oliver hesitated only a second before stepping into Caleb's arms. Ethan let him go. The crowd remained quiet, but whispers had begun to ripple behind them. Ruth appeared at Caleb's side like a wall made of love, her face calm and fierce. "The boys need a minute," she told Miss Alvarez. The teacher nodded quickly. Ethan stood, but he kept distance between himself and the children. Noah looked at him, then at Caleb. "Can he walk with us to the nurse?" The question was small, but it opened a door Caleb had spent 7 years holding shut. Ethan did not move. He waited. Caleb swallowed the old pain, the public humiliation, the fear of what people would say by dinner. Then he gave one slow nod. "Only to the nurse's office," he said. Ethan's eyes shone with something too fragile to name. "Only that," he answered. And as they crossed the playground together, Caleb understood that the word Oliver had cried in fear had changed everything. Not because it healed the past. Not because it forgave Ethan. But because for the first time, the truth had stepped into daylight, and no one could fold it back into silence. By the time Caleb reached the nurse's office, the schoolyard had already begun turning truth into rumor. He could feel it through the thin walls, in the sudden softness of voices outside the hallway, in the way parents pretended not to look through the small square window in the office door. Noah sat on the edge of the examination cot while the nurse checked his ankle and asked him to wiggle his toes. Oliver stood pressed against Caleb's side, still hiccuping from tears, one hand wrapped around the hem of Caleb's sweater. Ethan waited near the door, far enough away to prove he understood he had not earned closeness, close enough that both boys kept glancing at him when they thought Caleb was not watching. "No swelling," the nurse said gently. "Just startled. Maybe a little sore tomorrow." Caleb thanked her, but his attention was on Noah, whose face had gone quiet in the way it always did when he was thinking too much. Ethan looked like he wanted to speak to him, and knew he should not. That restraint should not have mattered. It did. When they stepped back into a hallway, Principal Harris was waiting with forced calm and worried eyes. "Mr. Monroe, there is someone from the Whitmore Foundation asking for you." Caleb knew before he saw her. Some people entered rooms with footsteps. Margaret Whitmore entered with atmosphere. She stood near the school office in a cream wool coat, pale hair pinned perfectly, leather gloves folded over one wrist, looking so out of place among children's artwork and pumpkin stickers that the whole hallway seemed to shrink around her. 7 years had not softened her. If anything, time had made her colder, more polished, more certain that the world was a table where she could rearrange other people's lives like place cards. Her eyes moved over Caleb first, dismissing him as if no time had passed, then settled on Noah and Oliver. Caleb felt Oliver tuck himself behind him. Noah stood very still. Ethan's voice was low. "Mother." Margaret smiled without warmth. "Ethan. We need to correct this before it becomes a public embarrassment." Caleb almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because after 7 years, that was still the language she knew. Not pain. Not children. Embarrassment. Ethan stepped between her and the boys. "You will not speak about them that way." Margaret's brows lifted. "Them? You do not even have confirmation of what they are." Noah's hand slipped into Caleb's. Ethan's jaw tightened. I know enough. No, Caleb said quietly. You know what you should have known 7 years ago. Ethan flinched, and Margaret seized the opening. This is exactly why we handle matters privately. Mr. Monroe, my legal team can prepare a reasonable agreement. Financial support, confidentiality, appropriate boundaries. If the children are connected to the Whitmore family, their future must be protected from instability. Ruth, who had arrived behind Caleb without anyone noticing, gave a sharp little breath. Caleb kept his voice calm because the twins were listening. Their future has been protected by packed lunches, bedtime stories, doctor visits, rent paid on time, and a town that knows their names. Not by your last name. Margaret's smile thinned. Sentiment does not stand up in court. The hallway went silent. Ethan turned fully toward his mother. Do not threaten him. I am protecting you. No, Ethan said, and for the first time since Caleb had known him, his voice did not carry the weight of obedience beneath its anger. You are protecting the version of me you built. Margaret's gaze sharpened. Careful. Ethan reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded set of papers. I called Daniel Price this morning. Margaret went still. Caleb recognized the name. Daniel Price had been a junior attorney for the Whitmore family years ago, the one whose office had sent Caleb the first settlement letter. Ethan looked at Caleb, and there was apology in his eyes before the words arrived. He told me the account used to create those messages was arranged through one of your assistants. The payment agreement had Caleb's signature copied from an old visitor form. The clinic letters were rerouted before they reached me. Caleb's chest tightened. The hallway blurred at the edges, not from shock, but from the awful relief of hearing the truth spoken out loud by someone else. Margaret's face did not change enough for strangers to notice, but Caleb saw the crack. Daniel was always weak, she said. Ethan stared at her. You told me Caleb took the money and left. I told you what was necessary. You told me he ended the pregnancy. The words fell softly, and somehow that made them worse. Caleb felt Oliver tremble against him. Noah's small fingers squeezed his palm. Ethan looked at the boys then, and grief moved across his face like a storm he could not command away. You made me mourn children who were alive. Margaret's answer came clean and cruel. I preserved your future. Ethan shook his head. You stole my family. For one dangerous second Caleb almost let that sentence stand. Then the old wound inside him rose, not as weakness, but as truth. No, Ethan. His voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. She opened the door. You walked through it. Ethan turned to him, devastated. Caleb did not look away. She lied. But you believed her because it was easier than believing me. Margaret's mouth tightened, but Ethan did not defend himself. That was the first honest thing he gave Caleb that day. No excuses. No polished explanation. Only the full weight of responsibility settling where it belonged. Principal Harris cleared his throat softly, uncomfortable but steady. I think this conversation needs to move off school property. Ruth stepped forward. That will not be necessary. The children are leaving with Caleb. Margaret looked at Noah and Oliver again, not like grandchildren, not like children, but like assets she had just discovered were missing. Ethan saw it too. He moved closer to Caleb, still not touching him, still careful. My mother will not contact you, the boys, the school, or the cafe again without your permission. I will put it in writing today. Margaret's eyes flashed. You cannot shut me out of my own bloodline. Noah spoke before any adult could. We are not your bloodline. We are Daddy's kids. Oliver nodded through tears. And Ruth's cafe kids. Ruth made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. Caleb pulled both boys close, one under each arm, and felt something inside him steady. For years, Margaret had existed in his memory as the woman who erased him. Now she stood in front of him with all her money and threats, and Caleb realized she could not erase what had grown without her. Ethan looked at his mother one last time. Leave Ashford. Margaret's face hardened. You will regret choosing them. Ethan's answer came after a long silence. I already regret the years I did not. Caleb did not thank him. He was not ready for that. But as he led Noah and Oliver out of the school, with Ruth beside him and Ethan staying behind to deal with the woman who had built the lie, Caleb understood something that frightened him more than hate. The enemy had finally stepped into the light, but that did not make Ethan innocent. It only made the path forward harder, because now the truth had names, documents, witnesses, and 2 little boys who would one day ask why every adult had failed them before they were even born. Winter came early to Ashford that year, soft at first, then all at once. By Thanksgiving, snow rested on the cafe awning like powdered sugar, the maple trees along Main Street stood bare and silver, and Bellwether Cafe and Books glowed every evening with amber lamps, paper stars, and the smell of cocoa warming behind the counter. Ethan did not try to move into that warmth. That was the first thing Caleb noticed. The alpha who had once let a conference room decide Caleb's future now stood outside boundaries without testing them. After the school hallway, he sent a written statement through his attorney confirming that Margaret Whitmore would have no contact with Caleb, Noah, Oliver, the school, or the cafe without Caleb's permission. He removed her from the foundation board, cancelled the Ashford publicity campaign, and privately funded a local family support program through Principal Harris with one condition: Caleb's name and the twins' names would never be used for reputation or press. Caleb heard all of this from other people before Ethan ever mentioned it, which mattered more than he wanted to admit. Regret, he was learning, could be performed in public, but repair happened in quiet places where no one clapped. Still, Caleb did not forgive him. He told Ethan that clearly on a cold Monday morning while Noah and Oliver were in school and Ruth pretended not to listen from behind the bakery case. "You can be present for them if they want that," Caleb said, both hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "But you do not get to rush them, and you do not get to rush me." Ethan stood on the customer side of the counter like any other man waiting to be allowed closer. "I understand." Caleb looked at him for a long moment. "No, you do not. But you can learn." So Ethan learned. He learned that Noah hated being surprised but loved astronomy, that he could name every planet in order and correct adults who still argued about Pluto. Ethan bought him a telescope, then returned it the next day after Caleb said gifts were not shortcuts. A week later, Ethan came back with a library card application and asked Noah if he wanted help finding books about winter constellations. Noah stared at him for almost a full minute before saying, "You can carry the heavy ones." Ethan learned that Oliver liked marshmallows shaped like stars, hated when his hot chocolate was too hot, and asked questions in spirals instead of straight lines. "Were you lonely when you did not know us?" Oliver asked one afternoon while Ethan sat at the corner table helping him glue paper snowflakes for school. Ethan set down the glue stick and answered like Caleb had told him to, without pretty lies. "Yes. But I was lonely because of choices I made." Oliver considered that. "That is sad." "It is. You can have one marshmallow, but only one." Ethan accepted it like a gift greater than anything his family name had ever bought. Caleb watched these moments from behind the counter, telling himself that observation was not hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope had once carried a medical report into Whitmore Tower and walked out alone. But Ethan did not ask for Caleb's heart. He asked whether Noah had his inhaler before field day. He asked Ruth how to fix the sticking hinge on the cafe's back door. He stood at the curb during school pickup and waited for the boys to decide whether they wanted to walk beside him. Sometimes Noah did. Sometimes he did not. Ethan accepted both. The first time Oliver called him Dad again, it was not in fear. It was on a Wednesday evening after the first real snowfall, when Ethan dropped off a forgotten science folder and found the twins building a lopsided snowman outside the cafe. Oliver waved with both mittened hands and shouted, "Dad, look, he has Ruth's scarf." Ethan froze for only a second. Then he looked to Caleb, who stood in the doorway with his apron still on and flour dusting one sleeve. Caleb gave the smallest nod. Ethan smiled, not wide, not triumphant, just grateful enough that Caleb had to look away. Noah added a carrot nose to the snowman and muttered, "It is an inaccurate scarf representation." Ruth called from inside, "I heard that, young man." For the first time in years, Caleb laughed before he could stop himself. The sound changed the air. Ethan heard it. Caleb knew he did, but the alpha did not reach for it. He simply stood in the snow with the boys, holding an extra pair of gloves Oliver had dropped, waiting to be useful. Christmas lights went up along Main Street in December. Bellwether's blue door wore a pine wreath, and the fourth chair at the kitchen table finally stopped living in Caleb's imagination. He bought one from an antique store 20 miles away, sanded it himself, and painted it dark green. When Noah asked who it was for, Caleb said, "For anyone invited." Noah thought about that and nodded, as if the answer passed inspection. On Christmas Eve, Ethan arrived with no expensive gifts, only a paper bag of oranges because Ruth had mentioned the twins loved them, and a small repaired music box Caleb had left behind in Queens 7 years ago. "I found it in storage," Ethan said quietly. "I should have returned it sooner." Caleb took the box, opened it, and heard the faint melody that had once played in a tiny apartment before everything broke. He did not cry. He did not forgive. But he did not close the door. Snow fell thick over Ashford that night, softening rooftops, sidewalks, and old wounds that still hurt when touched. Noah and Oliver ran past Caleb onto the sidewalk, their boots leaving wild tracks in the fresh white. "Dad, come see the lights!" Oliver called. Noah glanced back and added quieter, "You can come if you want." Ethan looked at Caleb first. Always first now. Caleb stood in the doorway of the cafe, one hand on the blue frame, the repaired music box resting on the counter behind him, the fourth chair visible through the upstairs window. 7 years ago, Ethan had made a choice that cost Caleb everything he thought love would be. Nothing could erase that. But across from him stood a man who had stopped asking for a place and started earning permission to stand near one. Caleb stepped aside, opening the door wider against the winter air. "Take your coat off first," he said. Ethan's breath caught, and for once, Caleb did not look away from the tenderness that followed. Some alphas believed forgiveness was a door they could break open. Ethan Whitmore learned it was a threshold he had to be invited across. And for the first time in 7 years, Caleb did not close it.